Hi, I'm Gordon Griffin, and I was due to give a talk at the Festival of Words, which was going to be later this summer. But of course, because of circumstances beyond all our control, I can't do that. So here's a sort of version of my talk here in self-isolation. It's about a boy who grew up on Tyneside in the early 1950s. He was passionate about the theatre. His dad was a fishmonger and biker, and he always wanted to be an actor. But he had a Geordie accent, and people used to say, you can't be an actor with a Geordie accent. So he wasn't discouraged, and he went on to become an actor, and a very busy and successful one. That was me. Cut to many decades later, when I received a letter in the post, a rather formal looking letter, and I left it on my desk, and I thought, I'm not going to look at that. It looks a bit too official, and it looks like bad news. Anyway, a couple of days later, I plucked up courage and I opened it, and I read the first sentence and then the second sentence once and twice, and then I let out an enormous yell. My partner came dashing in thinking I'd had a heart attack. What the letter said was, would I be minded to accept an MBE for services to audiobooks? At that point, I'd recorded about 800. It took me 1 second to say, yes, I would. I will accept it. I accepted for that little boy growing up who was not discouraged by people saying you'll never become an actor because of your Geordie accent. And I accepted it also for the audiobook industry, because when I first started, other actors rather frowned on it, looked down on it, said, oh, rather disparagingly, you record books for the blind, don't you? How different it is now. Everybody wants to do it. So my stepping stone that led me to audiobooks was radio. I did a lot of radio. And the great thing about radio is it doesn't matter what you look like, it's what you sound like. And my very first radio job was playing a 16-year-old boy in Mrs. Dale's diary, or the Dales as it was. I was 24, but I sounded 16, that was the point. And that was a revelation. You could do anything. And if you were convincing and sincere and honest, then the people listening would believe it, whatever age you were. It worked to my advantage because I played a lot of angst-ridden teenagers, often very good parts, and then eventually played one of the most famous angst-ridden teenagers ever, and that was Romeo in Romeo and Juliet. So when audiobooks started to come in, talking books as they were called, I got in touch with one of the companies that was starting out. I'd gone to my library in North London and I took out one of the audiobooks, the idea being that I'd write down the address and send my audition tape to them to see if I could record for them. By extraordinary coincidence, this company was in Whitley Bay, where I came from. We left Newcastle when I was 7, went to the coast when I was 7, as I say, and I lived in Whitley Bay for the entire length of that time till I went to drama school. So this guy who was running the company didn't have a studio then, but he said, yes, he would give me 4 audiobooks. So I was away. It was incredible. I took to it like a duck to water. I think it was about the 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th book where I did A Tale of Two Cities and I won an award. Now, I'm not boasting about that. It's just that I suddenly thought, actually, this is something that I could do. I also did about 10 Catherine Cookson books, because I'm a Geordie. I could do a Geordie accent, which led to a lovely correspondence from Dame Catherine herself. When I came to my 50th book, I recorded my 50th book. By now, the company had a studio. By now, audiobooks were starting to do pretty well. And we had a party. Nobody had ever recorded 50 books before. So we had a cake, we had candles, we had champagne. And it was a great celebration. When I recorded my 100th, now they had their own company, as I say. They were very, very busy, this company. It had really taken off in a big way. And I remember thinking at my 100th, I wonder if there's going to be a party. I wonder if there's going to be champagne to celebrate my 100th book. And the boss was coming towards me as I was going to the studio. And he said, oh, Gordon, I understand this is your 100th book. And I said, yes, yes, it is. And he said, well done, and walked on. I carried on doing this for quite a while. And along came then a company called W.F. Howe's. And their mantra was, audiobooks are for everybody. And this was something that came from America, where in the States, people were listening to books, all ages, because when we started with this original company, we were told to imagine a little old lady doing her knitting. She can't see very well, and she's listening to her cassette tape. Now this was a different approach. And because the audience was now a bigger one, it was anybody who wanted to listen to a book rather than to read it, then the books that we recorded were very much more varied. I was recording books that were up for the Booker Prize, for example, and also books were coming out at the same time. The audiobooks were coming out at the same time as the hardback edition. So this was a big game changer. I'm often asked about, for somebody who's just starting to record audiobooks, what advice I would give. I said, I will say I can give you 3 words that all audiobook narrators need to know. Preparation, preparation, preparation. You cannot do enough preparation. There's no such thing as not enough preparation. I know of many, many people who say, oh, but I don't need to read the whole book. I can skim read and get the idea, and I'm a very good sight reader. Fatal. It's full of minefields. I know so many examples of people who've got to the last chapter and discovered that the main narrator, who they thought was English, was American. And that little phrase that said they were American and still spoke with an American accent, they missed. So they have to go right back to the beginning and read the whole book again. So you've got to check pronunciation. You've got, if there's language, and I've done every language under the sun, from Serbo-Croat to Icelandic to Vietnamese, you've got to find someone who can speak that language and work with them. It's no good going to the studio and your producer said, oh, you know all that Swahili you've got to do, here it is. No, you've got to do all that preparation beforehand. And I always say, if you haven't enough time to do the preparation, don't do the book. And sometimes it can take ages. Quite often, for example, when I did the Alan Turing biography, it took weeks and weeks of reading and rereading all that complicated stuff. I'm not a mathematician, but when I went into the studio, I had to understand what I was saying. So preparation is all. I think the only time I ever came a cropper was when I was checking the pronunciation of one very complicated word in a book a long time ago about a Mallorcan detective called Alvarez. And I tried this Spanish tourist office. They said, this is not Spanish, this is Catalan, which is what they speak in Mallorquin. I spoke to a friend of mine who worked in Mallorca in the catering business. He didn't know. He put me onto someone in Palma who also spoke the language but didn't know what this word was. Now, it was important that I knew this word because it was a fungus that grows in Mallorca. And in this particular book, it was a bit like a mushroom, and they were chopping up this fungus in the story and putting it in people's salads and killing them. So it was important I got to know this because the word came all the way through. So in the end, I had to get in touch with the publisher, who gave me the name of the writer who lived in Mallorca, Roderick Jeffries he was called. I phoned him up, and he was very charming, and I explained the story. I spelt the word, and I said to him, how do you pronounce it? And he said, I've no idea. I made it up. Do your preparation. It's really, really, really important. And you'll be much better. If you mark up your script, that's going to help you so much more. Because if you can get a rhythm going, all the books have their own rhythm. And if you can get the rhythm going, it really is beneficial. And you'll find if you do make a mistake, you'll probably make a mistake 3 or 4 times around the same place until you get back into the room again. But if you do your preparation, you know everything that's going on, you've marked up your script, you've marked the characters, you've marked the accents, then magic can happen. It's just you in the studio, and you're there, you can tell the story, you can bring in the audience, and the characters chat away, and it all works wonderfully. Magic happens, as I say. Sometimes actors want to perform. They want to act. It's a natural instinct in actors. They perform to the gallery. They work out wonderful characterizations for their characters. But it's not that. It's more subtle than that. It's much more say, come here, listen, I've got this amazing story to tell you. Come on this journey with me. That's the way to do it. Of course, acting skills are important. I remember I did an interview on radio. It was a record program. In between the records, the presenter said to me, kept saying to the audience anyway, we have in the studio Gordon Griffin, who used to be an actor, and now records audiobooks. And he said this about 3 times. So in the end, I had to say, look, I am an actor. I'm still an actor. What I'm doing is acting. But the important thing is, it's not about me. You've got the writer, you've got the listener, and in between you've got the narrator. And the most important, as I say, is the writer, and you have to interpret what the writer has done. So when people say to me, what happens if you don't like a book? I say it's completely irrelevant what I think. I am interpreting what the writer has written. So if the dialogue is not convincing, I make it convincing. If the handsome hero that this writer has created, I think is obnoxious, it doesn't matter. I have to recreate the handsome hero. This is very, very important. If somebody's listening to one of my books and they say, oh, I love the way he does that character, I failed. They shouldn't be listening to how I read the book. They should be listening to the story itself. My favourite review said, Gordon Griffin is anonymous. He disappears. That's it. That is what we're trying to achieve. It was 2017 and I arrived. I was having dinner with friends of mine. This friend who told me that it wouldn't be the Queen, and I asked this chap. We were all sitting there with our glasses of water in this wonderful gallery at Buckingham Palace on the day of the investiture, as it were. And I said to this guy with all the medals, who's officiating? And he said, oh, it's the Queen. And I almost said, no, I have it on very good authority. It's not the Queen, but it was the Queen. And unbelievably, for a couple of minutes, I was eyeball to eyeball with Her Majesty talking about audiobooks. Unbelievable. And I kept thinking of that little boy growing up on Tyneside and thinking, yeah, well done. This is quite amazing. So I got the MBE. Now, what's happening now? Well, it's quite interesting because you have to keep ahead of the game if you're recording audiobooks. You have to be pretty technically assured because now I've just finished recording my 4th audiobook from home. And that's been quite a learning curve, to say the least. And what happens next? Well, that's another story.